You are listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with Steve Worsley, the toxic mold expert and your number one source for mold consulting and mitigation in the USA. Let's dive into a brand new episode.
Before we get started on this episode, here's a not-so-short disclaimer. While all attempts have been made to verify the content provided in this podcast, neither the podcaster nor the producers assume any responsibility for errors, omissions, or alternative interpretations of the issues discussed here. All information stated in this podcast is the opinion of Steve Worsley. Steve Worsley is a mold specialist with over 25 years of experience in the construction and mold industry. The Toxic Mold Podcast is for information sharing purposes only. The views expressed are those of the podcaster and his alone. These views should not be taken as expert instruction or commands. While there may be references to medical conditions and symptoms, all podcast episodes are the opinion of Steve Worsley, and any medical questions or concerns shall be addressed with the appropriate licensed medical professional or professionals. As the podcaster refers to different mold types, please be aware that Steve Worsley is not a microbiologist, and questions concerning mold specifics should be answered by the appropriate professional. Steve isn't, nor does he offer any legal advice. For any legal advice, you must speak to a lawyer. The listener is 100% responsible for his or her own actions. You can check out Steve's books on Amazon. Just go to Amazon and search for author Steve Worsley. You can also take Steve's mold education courses, such as Mold 101 and the Mycotoxin Prevention Kit, by going to cnccontractorservices.com. Again, check out his mold education courses at cnccontractorservices.com. Now, let's get to the episode.
Hello, you're listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with myself, Steve Worsley. We have my wife, Cassandra. We're getting close to, it's finally, I wouldn't say it's warm, but it's warming up.
In the tundra, yes. We're getting better.
We got lucky, though, this winter.
We didn't have a winter. It was amazing.
Well, we're not going to be saying that when everything's on fire.
No.
Anyhow, I hope all of you are doing well. Today's topic is an interesting one. This is something you came up with, and I think it's a great topic. Toxic mold, real estate, and the expert you need before you close. So what made you decide to even kind of come up with it?
Well, I think the pandemic real estate craze that happened starting in 2020 was really something to watch, because people went from always getting a home inspection before they closed on a house to running online, looking at a house, not even going to see it, living somewhere out of state, not requiring a home inspection just so they could get the deal, bidding wars, then closing on something that then they go to figure out whether or not it's a lemon.
Yeah.
And that trend has continued even after the pandemic is over. And so lots of people are foregoing doing all the things they probably should be doing to make sure that they're not buying, what's it called? Like
a money pit?
A money pit. That's the Tom Hanks movie. I love that movie, The Money Pit. A money pit that they are now stuck with because they put in all this money. And so I thought it would be good to talk about, because I thought before you explained it to me that if I hire a home inspector to inspect a house before I close, of course a mold inspection comes with that. Of course it does. And you're like, no.
Yeah. Well, and you thought radon testing.
Yeah, like all of it. I thought that the whole kit and caboodle came with it.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I asked you about it, I said, so did you call the inspector and set everything up? And you're like, no, my realtor did it.
Yeah, every house I bought, my realtor took care of all of that. I didn't have to worry about a thing. And I thought it was great, but I didn't realize the conflict of interest.
Yes, and, one of my second best-selling books is Black Mold in Home Inspections, What Your Realtor Won't Tell You.
Exactly.
And for the realtors that listen, and they know this, I'm not slamming realtors. I just walk people through the process and, what realtors are paid to do. And there are things that they just don't even think about. But it's a red flag when your realtor is the one hiring the inspectors. And for those that don't know, I'm a certified home inspector. So that's what I used to do all the time. And I would say, I'll bet you 70% of the time, it was the realtor that contacted me.
Oh, I believe it. I believe it. And I guess the whole thing to talk about in this episode is oftentimes I think people think about bringing in a mold specialist after they close on the home. And so I wanted to get your take on when should somebody who's thinking about buying a house, in the process of buying a house, at what point should they be bringing in somebody who's a mold specialist?
In my opinion, you should be bringing at least an IEP in, consultant, something, before you even start looking at homes.
And would you say even if this person or this family has no history of mold allergies, mold concerns, they should still have somebody involved?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And, one thing you mentioned mold allergies, that mold toxicity and mold allergies are night and day.
Mm-hmm.
Like a mold allergy, I don't want to downplay it because I know a lot of people have allergies. I'm not going to say it's not a big deal, but mold toxicity it's a lot worse than a mold allergy. But I think the good thing about bringing somebody on is, and I can only speak for me, so I'm a certified home inspector, so I probably have a little more familiarity with how everything works. But you got to be careful. Don't just run to a mold specialist that's an alarmist. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's gonna make the whole thing worse. But it helps to talk to somebody who has done this for a living that says, hey, here's what I would avoid, and here's what you should look for when you're looking at the homes, and here's how I would set up your offer as far as contingent upon appraisals and inspections. For me, if you get the right person, they'll be a great asset through the entire process. But I want to be clear with our listeners, you could get the wrong person and it could be an alarmist that's disastrous.
What are some of the red flags that our listeners should be thinking through when they're walking through a home?
When I was doing home inspections, my biggest concern was a fresh coat of paint.
Why?
Because we don't know why they did it.
But I would think somebody who's wanting to sell a house, that's one of the first things they do. They'd make redo
All the improvements.
Absolutely. So why is that a red flag, though?
Because you don't know what they covered up.
Oh.
So it's just a simple question, like, why did you paint the house? It's interesting, and this is why we all have differing opinions. If we were selling our house and we needed it, we knew it needed a fresh coat of paint, I would say to you, like, well, let's give them, $1,000 in allowance to have the house painted after it's under contract and after we've moved out, and then they can choose the color. Like, that's how I view it.
See, I would just say paint it all white walls, stage the house beautifully, because people buy houses that they can see themselves in.
Right. But you've got to understand, like, this is coming from somebody who has seen a lot of things that are covered up.
Exactly. So
you can cover up a lot of stuff with a fresh coat of paint.
So as soon as somebody sees a fresh coat of paint, that should be their signal to investigate.
Just ask questions.
Okay.
I'll bet 90% of the time, the sellers were not covering anything up. There was nothing intentional. But as the buyer, you have to ask the question, what was the purpose? And you're going to hear the same thing.
Okay.
What you just said.
Yeah. So what are some other red flags?
Water stains.
Oh, so you see water stains.
Yeah, you're looking around, you're looking at the baseboards, seeing if there's any discoloration. That's a huge red flag.
Okay.
Another red flag, and I used to see this all the time as an inspector, they would have air fresheners in every room.
But don't you want the house to smell nice when people come
You do, but
to an
once
open house?
again, it's no different. Like, let's just say I was a lawyer. I would probably see everything in a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Because that's just what you do. You're asking somebody who has seen a lot of things covered up. And whether I know if it's intentional or not, to me, it doesn't matter. It got covered up. And air fresheners, they're notorious for that. Remember, we went to an open house in town. It was affordable housing. The house was, what, $540,000?
$500 million.
There's
That's
nothing
not affordable
about it. But we went in there, and what did they have for us? Well, we didn't eat anything.
They had sandwiches. They had whiskey.
Yeah.
I didn't see any air fresheners. Did you?
No.
Okay, because I think we're starting to get more environmentally conscious, and air fresheners are bad VOCs.
But most realtors are told bake cookies.
Oh, that's right. The smell of the cookies. That's right. So that's the air freshener these days.
But yeah, I'm not saying it is, but I'm just telling you.
Yeah.
Those are red flags.
Okay. So that's really terrible because cookies are good. So really, you're just saying start to notice what you can't see, you can't hear, and you can't smell because of the way the home is presented.
Yeah, and what I'm telling our listeners is I'm not telling you to go in there and just, be pessimistic about everything, but ask yourself the question, why are they doing that? And when you ask yourself, your intuition's going to tell you, hey, they just said they remodeled everything. And, once you start digging deeper into it, once again, just because it was remodeled doesn't mean they're covering something up.
Okay.
But then when you have that information and then you have an inspector come in, and once again, home inspectors, they weren't all like me, certified in home inspections, mold inspections, radon testing, mold mitigation contractor. Most home inspectors, that's all they do.
Mm-hmm.
They're what we call a generalist. Their job is like for our listeners to go to your GP when you think something's wrong with you. They do the initial assessment, and then what do? Recommend a specialist.
Exactly.
That's what the home inspector's for. But going back to what I was saying, if you know some of the history, you can go, oh, Steve told us to ask why they did this, and now we know why. But when we did the visual inspection, we noticed some red flags. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes sense. But then I guess my question for you is, a lot of people feel like they're at a disadvantage when they're buying a house, especially still in today's market, because they feel like we can only afford this much. The number of homes that meet our criteria in this price range are few and far between. It still is very much a seller's market. And so people often feel like they're at the mercy of the market. And so even if they have intuitive concerns about a house, they feel like if we don't jump on this, somebody else will. What do you say to that?
Well, and I talk about this all the time, don't make a big decision quickly with a lot of emotion involved. It's an emotional thing for the buyers. That's the luxury of hiring an inspector. Mm-hmm. I have zero emotional attachment to this home.
But how do realtors look at a prospective buyer who, as soon as they want to go, they see a house the first time, then you turn to the realtor and you go, okay, I really like this house. Next time I'm coming with my mold expert. Like, I'm sure realtors don't love that.
I can't speak for realtors, but I could say this. There are plenty of good realtors out there, so I want to be clear about that. But there are some shady ones. There's shady people in every industry. They don't like good inspectors.
Of course. And I guess I would like your advice for people, because some people are not bulldozers. And some people feel bad if they stand up for themselves and say, no, I need to have my mold person look this over. How do you recommend people navigate that conversation with a realtor to make sure they're not putting $100,000 down on a house before they get it inspected?
Well, so let's kind of backtrack a little bit. And how did we start this episode? When should you get
when should you bring
somebody involved? And I said right from the get-go.
So wait, before you even start looking at houses on Realtor.com and Zillow?
And I can only speak for me, but there's plenty of us in our industry. There's plenty. There's really, really good consultants out there. But they should be preparing you and saying, okay, before you choose your realtor, you need to ask them X, Y, and Z.
Okay.
When you're looking at the home, you need to look for X, Y, and Z. That's the best way to approach it all, is to go in prepared.
Okay.
And I used to say this to my clients all the time when I was doing home inspections. It's really funny because when I would go in there, I'm looking for major concerns. Mm-hmm. When they go in there, what are they looking at?
How beautiful
the color of the walls.
Yeah, like
is our furniture going to fit in here?
Exactly. How big are the windows? Yes.
So that's the good thing about having an inspector in there, is they don't have any emotional attachment to it. Mm-mm. But you've got to be very careful, going back to what we were talking about. Choosing your realtor is a big deal.
Yeah, it is.
What if you have a realtor that they're kind of a bulldozer? They're just salesmen or saleswomen. All they want to do is sell this house. They don't want to show you more than 5 homes. They want to do it quickly. Maybe they need money for a vacation. Those are things you've got to pay attention to when you're picking a realtor.
Mm-hmm. And so, so you're saying get the mold expert involved before you even start looking at homes. But once you get to the place where you found a home you love, you're emotionally attached, you want to put down some earnest money, how should a person approach that part of the journey? Well,
it's interesting because I just spoke with a client that they put a very large sum down for is it escrow, or what do they call it?
I thought it's earnest money.
Or earnest, that's what it's called.
Yeah, earnest money.
Well, now they're having some mold concerns, and they've done some testing, and now they're not even sure if they can get the earnest money back.
And part of that is because I'm assuming when you put the minimum amount of earnest money, which I think is something like $1,000, depending on what the home is going for, but it's a very little amount typically. But I think people nowadays are putting way more money down because it convinces the buyer to choose you. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, it's a game. Okay.
Yeah. And, I guess my point with that is make sure, so you don't just go hand the realtor the earnest money. You put in an offer, it's done through your realtor, the sellers either accept it or decline it. Then you have all these conditions on the offer. It's a conditional offer. It should be conditional upon appraisals and inspections.
Okay.
Now, if our listeners like, well, it's a cash deal. And that's the client that I was just telling you about. It was a cash deal. So there is no appraiser. But why is that important? Well, if they're selling the home for $550,000 and you're financing part of it, the appraiser is going to go in. And if it's only worth $450,000, guess who has to cough up the $100,000?
Yeah, you do.
So make sure it's contingent upon appraisals and inspections. Now, when it comes to the inspection side of things, the biggest nightmare for our listener and for an inspector is, we only have 10 days. Well, who set that 10 days?
Yeah, it's got to be equal. You both have to agree to it. Don't just sign something.
And my point is it's not that hard to tell your realtor. We need to make sure that we have at least 14 days for the inspection deadline. So that's the deadline when you have to have the inspector in there.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have a resolutions deadline typically, which is a few days after that. Meaning,
so like 3 weeks.
Yes. But usually the contingency, the resolutions is only a few days, but you should make it long enough that you can negotiate with the sellers.
Does saying I'm putting down this money based on contingent on inspections and appraisals, does that mean if I don't like what came back from the inspection and the seller's form of resolution is not something I agree with, can I then turn it down and get my money back?
Well, I mean, that's a legal question, but the client I was just talking about, that's the conundrum they're in right now. They think they're going to lose their earnest money.
That's why you put very little down.
And they didn't. This is in a community that's very the properties. A lot of people want it. It's a highly desired area, and they didn't know going into this. Now they're probably going to learn the hard way. But to answer your question, that's where it's important to have a realtor that knows what they're doing.
Okay.
We all have to start somewhere, but I wouldn't want to be that realtor's first or second sale. I would want them to have sold, 15, 20 properties before I was their client. Well,
and now that you're saying all of that, it also makes me think it's also important to have a lawyer who understands these issues. Now, there are not a lot of mold literate lawyers. We're talking like probably less than 1% at this point. That will grow over time. But you also don't want to find yourself in a situation where you need a lawyer who understands how to sue when it comes to mold later on, and you don't actually have any legal counsel.
Yeah, and it's funny because you always tell me I should become a lawyer. And
yeah, you should.
I'm debating it, but it's because there's just nobody in that field. But you do have to make sure that you're clear with your realtor. Like, we want to be clear. If the inspection or the mold testing comes back bad and they're not willing to address the issues, we want to be able to get out of the contract.
Exactly.
And only lose the money we paid the inspector.
Exactly.
So
all of that has to be in the offer?
Yeah, typically what happens is you reach out to your realtor and you say, okay, we're going to offer $450,000. They send the offer over, and in the offer, and things are different everywhere. So our listeners know I'm not a realtor, so I can't speak to like everything. But it says in there, once it's accepted, the accepted offer, both parties sign, buyers and sellers, and then it has all the contingencies.
Yes. So, but I want to go to a different scenario, because I think a lot of what we're talking about here has a lot of leverage that the home buyer can use when it is a single family home. But let's say you're living in New York City. Mm-hmm. And you're talking about buying a high-rise condo where you're going to be living in the same apartment building with hundreds of other people. Does the mold game change when you're buying something like that?
Big time. Because I have a client that's their issue. And when it's all said and done, I told her, I'm like, you have to buy a single family home.
Yeah, because you can't control
everybody else around you.
Yeah.
It's so difficult. And, it's funny because I'm sure listeners watch, what was the latest series that we watched? He wrote Yellowstone. Madison.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
They live in this big high-rise,
New York City apartment.
Exactly.
Yep.
And then they have,
a place in Montana.
Exactly. So, just keep that in mind. Like, I get it. People, like, my dad was one of those kinds of people. Like, that's what he would have loved to have done.
City slicker.
Just, he didn't want to have to take care of anything. But you got to keep that in mind when you're, even as a renter, when you're living in a multi-family dwelling, you can only control your airspace.
Exactly. But you're connected to other people's airspaces and you cannot control what happens in theirs.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah. So overall, what do you tell people to do when they're even thinking about buying a house?
Like I said, get somebody on board. It doesn't have to necessarily be a mold specialist, but get some sort of consultant that's familiar with mold before you start anything. And then don't make any rushed decisions.
Okay.
Because you know this, you make a decision based on emotion and you don't think through all the what ifs.
No, and that's why having a mold expert helps you have an objective person to help pull you out of the emotional space.
Exactly. Yep.
There you go.
All right. Well, we talked about books last week, but we have consultations that are available on the website. We have the mycotoxin prevention kit. We have mycotoxin testing packages. We have all sorts of stuff.
Yep.
So go to our website. If you're not sure what you need, reach out to info@cnccontractorservices.com. They'll get you in touch with me and I'll push you in the right direction of where you need to go. We have a lot to offer. And don't hesitate. So we appreciate all you listeners. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Are you ready to take control of your environment and protect yourself from harmful mycotoxins? If you said yes to that, check out the Mycotoxin Prevention Kit. This easy-to-follow digital program is delivered straight to your inbox, guiding you through simple steps to reduce your exposure to the harmful byproduct of toxic mold, helping you feel safer and healthier at home. The Mycotoxin Prevention Kit gives you loads of education on mycotoxins for a really affordable price. Get started today by visiting cnccontractorservices.com/mycotoxin prevention kit. That's cnccontractorservices.com/mycotoxin prevention kit.